Well, hello there. Thanks for joining me. I am Dr. Jen, and this is my life as a landlord. I'm so pleased you've joined me for today's show all about New Jersey. So, this is yet another one of my location-specific tenant episodes, and I'm actually really pleased that we are doing this one. I've heard a lot about New Jersey. There's a lot of resources out there, and so I'm excited that we're going to get to it. So, let's talk about what we're going to go through in this episode. In all of my location specific episodes, including this one, I've got a ton of hyperlink resources in the show notes. I'm going to go through all of those. And so you can see it as we go through them. I can add more, take away, whichever. So the Tenancy Act in New Jersey is called Truth in Renting Act. And we're going to go through that and all of the supporting resources, answering four questions. What are the basics of the tenancy laws in New Jersey? What are the nuances? And then get some guidance about abandoned items that might be left behind by a tenant, and then where to get help. At the very end, I'll go through what I call my bingo card. It's sort of a checklist that is the basics. It just sort of goes through, did we get everything? Did we talk about everything? Did New Jersey get it all? Often many places don't get it all. And so let's just go through it. Let's get a running start and get you some help. Now, I must tell you that even if I get it 100% bang on perfect and everything that is in this episode is exactly correct, 5 minutes after recording, it could change. So you've got to make sure that you do your own research for your own rentals in municipalities, counties, anything that is a nuance of where your rentals are located. You've got to do your own research here because I'm going to give you a running start, but I can't do it all. You've got to do the research for yourself. So it's not all inclusive. Just keep that in mind. Okay. I'm going to give a shout out to today's sponsor, Aloha Capital Investments, LLC. If you want to know more about real estate investing and what Mike and I are up to, check out alohajv.com. Okay, I'm going to share screen here, and I've got all the hyperlinks open. So if you're watching on YouTube at My Life as a Landlord, that is going to be the easiest way to see this so you can see it on screen. You can also just listen to me rattle things off, which is fine. So I've got on the screen here the first hyperlink. This is called Truth in Renting, a guide to rights and responsibilities of residential tenants and landlords in New Jersey. It's 55 pages long, and it's pretty comprehensive. I'm actually pretty impressed so far, just looking at the table of contents and some of the other resources that we've got. But talking about mobile home leases, there's a little bit difference on all of this. Public housing, cable install. I'm not really sure why that's got to be spelled out by itself, but we're going to see. Pets, I'm glad to see any mention of pets. I'm actually kind of surprised when I don't see anything because there's pets is kind of a normal thing in life these days. Let's see, right of entry, filing complaint, security deposits, disposition of personal property. Exactly, there you go. There's abandonment. We're going to talk about that. Consumer fraud protection, credit checks and background checks, rent, rent control and rent increases, because I know it can get really kind of dicey in this neighborhood. We'll see how that all works. And then there is some different credits and rebates. I'm not really sure how that all goes, but this will be interesting. Property tax rebate for tenants. I don't understand what that is, but we're going to talk about it. Identity of a landlord. Let's talk about that. Child protection, window guards and screens, carbon monoxide smoke detectors, federal and state lead-based paint disclosure, drinking water test results. Lots of environmental things, like lots of habitability items. This tells me that there's been a lot of problems in New Jersey, which is what has led to this type of legislation and enforcement. Okay, moving on. We've got eviction, causes for eviction, foreclosure, senior citizen and disabled tenants in condos or in a co-op, conversion. Okay, interesting. Let's see how we go here. So they say greetings. I love that they say that. Greetings. Okay, overview. Give you some resources here and the website. Okay, so they start right off the hop with the lease. Landlord-tenant relationships created when a landlord allows another person to use a dwelling unit for a specified period of time in exchange for rent. And then they define dwelling unit. They talk about this. So requirements of a residential lease in New Jersey. And of course, all of this is by statute. Like it's either statute or previous cases that have been argued. So parties to a lease must be 18 years or older and 18 years old and mentally competent. And they must include their names in the lease agreement. And it could be written or oral. However, if you are going to do a handshake agreement, make sure that you understand that you're setting yourself up for frustration later if things go sideways. This is interesting. If written, a lease must be in plain language and written so the average person can understand. So it can't be full of jargon, right? Like high words and things like that. Any fees that a landlord intends to charge should be clearly stated, i.e., late fees or attorney fees. That's important. And then in order to avoid confusion, is recommended that the lease contain a bunch of the information, just standard stuff, conditions of the occupancy, description, rental renewal provisions, late rent penalty provisions, so late fee stuff, requirement to provide copies of the keys to the landlord by the tenant if they change the locks, things like that. So a tenant's requirement to obtain renter's insurance. So they require renter's insurance. That is new. And let's see. Landlord should provide specific information to the tenant about, let's see, lead EPA approved information pamphlet, truth and renting statement, flood zone, child protection, window guards, bed bugs, late fees, dishonored payment fees, so like NSFs, domestic violence. And it is really, wow, this is really thick in here. Yeah, each household, okay. So everybody's got before you do oh, this is a mobile home park. Okay, mobile park owner. Okay, public housing leases, renewals, cable install. This is what was interesting. A landlord may not forbid or prevent install of cable service or unreasonably restrict a tenant from installing an individual satellite dish. Yeah. So the satellite dishes, this became a thing when you've got apartment buildings and everybody wants their own satellite dish. And so you look at the building and it's a sea of satellite dishes. And so that has been a problem in years past, in decades past. And so, um, but they can't inhibit that. Like that's part of a quality of life. And so that's why it says that a landlord may not forbid or prevent install, especially for a satellite dish. So now, of course, you still got to apply. Installation of the satellite dish must be in compliance with the federal communications regulations. And let's see, but a landlord may restrict the install of a cable or satellite dish in common areas such as stairwells, roofs, exterior walls of multiple dwellings. Yeah, and you can't damage property, right? You can't do that. So yeah, this is interesting. And then it talks about pets. Generally, landlords have a right to include a no pets provision in the lease. However, there is no state law that prohibits landlords from requiring lease agreements that exclude pets in rental property, except in certain senior citizen housing projects for handicapped, blind, or deaf tenants. There's a precedent case that allows tenants in certain circumstances to keep their existing pets at their rental units, and then it goes into what they've seen. Okay, so actually wow, there's a lot about pets in here. Okay. So, and then it keeps going here about pets. So it's talking about the importance of having a pets with senior citizens or folks that are maybe disabled in some way. Landlord may refuse to renew a tenant's lease because of a pet under the following circumstances. If a pet's existence or behavior violates federal, state, or local building health or use codes, if a tenant fails to properly care for the pets, right? Like if they can't walk them and they're pooping or peeing all over the place, or they're not picking that up. If a tenant fails to control the pet when taking the pet to and from the building, or if the tenant fails to take prompt action to remove any pet waste when requested by the landlord. Yeah. And then if a tenant fails to keep the pet's waste functions confined to the areas that do not interfere with common areas. Yeah, I think that's pretty standard. Municipal court may declare the dog potentially dangerous. Oh, this is interesting because I've had potentially dangerous dogs. I've had aggressive dogs. So potentially dangerous dogs meet the following. They causes bodily injury bodily injury to a person during an unprovoked attack, poses a serious threat of bodily injury to a person, poses a threat to a severely injured or has killed another pet, or the dog has been trained or encouraged to engage in unprovoked attacks on people. And the other thing that Yeah, so that's aggressive behavior. So you just want to be careful. But municipal court, it says right here, municipal court may declare the dog potentially dangerous. A landlord may require a tenant to remove a pet from rental premises if the pet is continuing nuisance to the welfare or property of the landlord and other residents. And then it goes on, continuing nuisance. Yeah. Yeah, and if you don't allow pets for people who potentially need them, like handicapped folks, blind or deaf people, then that's considered discrimination. So you have to be really careful on how this all works, right? Especially if they have a service animal, right? If that's what they're doing, they're servicing, there's a service animal, that's not a pet, right? If you've listened to other episodes in the library here, that different animals have different jobs. A pet doesn't have a job at all. It's a freeloader. It does nothing. But a service animal has a job. It's like a prosthetic leg. It's actually part of the quality of life of the human it serves. And so there is a service that this dog does. And so you can't not have them, and you can't deny someone because they have this animal that's not part of it. Okay, let me keep going here, because all this is under pets, and honestly, it shouldn't be under pets. Um, okay, termination of the lease agreement. Oh my goodness, they just have precedent law all over the place. Wow. Termination due to domestic violence. And of course, if you're watching this on YouTube, you can see there is just lots and lots of precedent, which is not a bad thing. Right of entry. So you want to make sure that you have permission to enter a home, enter a unit. Um, and this is basically if you have to go into a unit, then you have to have court's permission. Or you have to give proper notice and have a reasonable reason to go. Hmm. Access to the property, security deposits. Let's get into some security deposits. Security deposit law applies to most residential properties, including mobile homes. The exception is an owner-occupied 2 or 3 family dwelling unit. Sorry, the exception is an owner-occupied 2 or 3 family dwelling. So the owner lives on site. A tenant in an owner-occupied 2 or 3 family dwelling may, however, make this provision applicable to their tenancy 30 days after sending written requests to the landlord that the landlord fulfill the requirements of the security deposit law. In New Jersey, the landlord is not required to collect a security deposit from the tenant. However, if they do, they must follow prescribed rules and regulations. Maximum security deposit to be collected by the landlord cannot be 1.5 times month's rent, and it can be less. And any additional yearly security deposit increase may not exceed 10% of the current security deposit. So security deposit can match rent, um, as it's increased. So security deposits can go up. Interesting. A landlord may not charge a pet security deposit if it exceeds 1.5 months rent. So 1.5 months rent, all in. Yep. And that's the security deposit. Okay. So here we go. A landlord who receives security deposit money for 10 or less units must deposit that money in an insured bank or savings and loan association located in New Jersey in an interest-bearing account at the current interest rate at the time of the deposit. So that's the game. If you have 10 or less units, you must deposit it into an interest-bearing account within New Jersey. And a landlord who receives security deposit more money for 10 or more units has the option of investing the money in an insured money market fund. Oh, okay. So if it's less than 10 units, you've got to do a New Jersey interest bearing. If you've got 10 units or more, you can do a money market fund where investments that mature in 1 year or less and deposit that money in a state or federally chartered bank savings. Okay. And it doesn't include seasonal use. Okay. And then it defines seasonal use rentals. Okay, interest and earnings paid on the security deposit belongs to the tenant shall be paid to the tenant in cash or credited toward rent owing on the renewal of the anniversary. or on January 31st. Within 30 days of receipt of the security deposit and each annual payment, you basically got to give them a statement, but they also have to know where their deposit is, banking institution or their investment company, where it is, the amount, the type of account, the current rate of interest. And then if you move it, you have to tell them. Okay, very interesting. You've got to declare to the tenant. Cool. Okay, so then it shifts gears. Within 5 business days after a tenant is displaced by flood, fire, condemnation, or evacuation, the landlord must return the security deposit. So, okay, so if they depart the unit because of an emergency, or basically the unit becomes inhabitable, they have to return within 5 days. The law requires the return whenever authorized public official has posted notice prohibiting occupancy or has certified that the displacement has begun continue longer than 7 days. And within 3 business days of having received the notice of the displacement, the landlords must let the tenant know where the security deposit can be collected. Okay. And then, of course, in the event this doesn't happen, then everybody ends up in small claims, and there's different levels. Goodness, this is super detailed. I am just shocked at how detailed this is. Maybe some people from New Jersey need to go down to Kentucky. If you haven't watched the Kentucky version of this, it's a little traumatic because it doesn't really have hardly anything. So, okay, I'm going to, so it talks about discrimination, disposition. Oh, here we go, personal property. So let's talk about this. This is let's see. In the event a landlord of residential property may dispose of any personal property, tangible goods, manufactured, or mobile homes left on the premises after having given notice to the tenant prior to disposition of the property, or the tenant has provided the landlord with a written notice that they're relinquishing possession of the premises. The landlord may then dispose of the property if they believe the tenant has left the property on the premises with no intention of asserting further claim of the personal property and the premises. Additionally, the landlord must satisfy the following conditions. There's 3 of them. Written notice to the tenant that the requirements of the abandoned property law concerning delivery and storage. Notice shall be sent by certified mail, receipt requested, or receipted first-class mail addressed to the tenant and tenant's last known address, any alternate address known to the landlord. And a warrant for removal has been executed and possession of the property has been restored to the landlord, meaning they now have control over the unit. This is basically a writ of possession. Or the tenant has given written notice that they're voluntarily relinquishing possession of the premises. So basically, the landlord has control of the unit now, and they have permission to, they have been given written notice to the tenant. So this is interesting. And so then it continues, if the abandoned property is not removed by the tenant, then the landlord may sell the property at a public or private sale, or the landlord may destroy or otherwise dispose of the property if the landlord reasonably determines that the value is so low that the cost of storage and conducting a public sale would probably exceed the amount that they would get. It doesn't make any sense. Or the landlord may sell the items of value and destroy the otherwise dispose of the other remaining property. And then it talks about, this just goes on and on here too, about compliance and good faith. This is all based in, yeah, all in precedence, and it gives you the number there. Non-payment and distraint. The landlord is prohibited from taking or holding a residential tenant's possessions for non-payment of rent. The legal term for this practice is called distraint. I did not know that. Distraint. I just thought they were stealing stuff. I didn't know that. A landlord cannot use distraint for money owed on a lease or other agreement for a unit only used as a residence. A tenant may sue for damages. Okay. Consumer fraud protection. Okay. A tenant has the ability to pay the full rent on time. An owner has a responsibility to maintain the dwelling in a habitable condition. That's the game. Pay the rent on time, be engaged. Okay, so let's see. A tenant who remains in a unit after giving his or her landlord written notice of the intent to leave may be held responsible for double the rent payments for the months that the tenant continues to occupy the unit without a lease. Double rent payments. The payment of double rent payments shall be continued during the time which the tenant continues the possession of. Basically, it's an overhold, and the penalty is double the rent. Wow. Okay. Then it talks about seniors, senior security, old age pension, railroad retirement pension. Okay. So it's saying any senior citizen receiving these special pensions must be given a 5 business day grace period for payment when rent is due on the first of the month. No delinquency or late charge may be assessed during that grace period for those pensioners. Okay, I've never seen that before. That's actually kind of cool. Rent control and rent increases. The state of New Jersey has no laws that establish or governs or controls rent. Municipalities may pass an ordinance establishing rent control or rent leveling. Locally created boards enforce this ordinance. Rent control ordinances have been upheld as a valid exercise of the municipal police power when there's a housing shortage, and there's a bunch of precedences here. Um, Yeah. So tenant may contact rent control board is who you go to. And so this is super geographic specific. I'm not going to go into this because I know there are rent control laws in the different municipalities in New Jersey. So I'm not going to go there. Let's keep going though. I'm just scrolling down still in our first resource. So I'm actually going to keep going. Property tax rebate for tenants. In fact, if you are a New Jersey landlord listening to this and you can explain this to me, please call me or email me because I do want to learn more about this property tax rebate for tenants. I do not understand what this is. Let's see. So it says the Tenants Property Tax Rebate Act, as amended in 1998, may require owners of properties with 5 or more rental units to pass on to their tenants as a rent credit or cash rebate the full amount of any current property tax reduction. Reductions are calculated by comparing the current year taxes with the previous year, beginning in 1998. That shows a larger tax amount. The difference is to be rebated to the tenants. Municipalities with no rent control ordinances that do not permit landlords to pass tax increases along to the tenants are not subject to the law. Okay, I would be really kind of shocked in this day and age when we're talking about inflation in late 2025. We're talking a lot about inflation. We're talking about interest rates. I am not, I would really be surprised if there is property tax rebate, if there is a year-to-year reduction in the amount of taxes, so much so that the tenants would get a rebate. I don't think that is our world right now. Interesting, though. I've never seen that property tax rebate to the tenant. Okay, and then there are other programs like the New Jersey Homestead Property Tax Credit, the identity of a landlord. This is interesting. I've never seen this. And so it's a whole page. So it says a landlord who owns 1 or 2 family non-owner occupied home is required by law to file a registration statement with the clerk of the municipality in which the building is located. If the building has 3 or more units, a statement must be filed with the Bureau of Housing Inspection Post Office Box in Trenton, New Jersey, on a registration form provided by the Bureau. The Bureau sends a validated copy of the filed registration form to the municipal clerk. Owner-occupied 2 family homes are not required to be registered, but it looks like these 1 or 2 family, so one basically either single-family homes or a duplex is required by law to file a registration statement with the municipality. And if they have 3 or more units, that statement has to be filed with the Bureau of Housing Inspection. Interesting. The landlord registration law prohibits the landlord from evicting a tenant in the building if the landlord has not been properly registered. You got to pay to play. Landlords have to be registered with somebody. Okay. So basically they're trying to get away from illegal units. You see this, right? So everybody's got to have their units declared, right? They don't want any illegal units. This would never fly in Hawaii. Everybody has illegal units. Wow. Okay, the registration statement. Okay, so this talks about how to do it, how they got to file, why they got to file, maximum penalties if you don't file. This talks about habitability. Child protection, window guards, and screens. Now, I've never seen this. This is the only one I've seen where this goes really deep into this. Requirement does not apply to seasonal rental units. Okay, fair enough. Nor does this requirement apply to owner-occupied units, condos, or co-ops. Leases must contain a notice advising tenants that, upon written request by the tenant, the owner is required to provide, install, and maintain window guards in dwelling units with children 10 years of age or younger, which is a safety aspect. You don't want the kids falling out of the window. So that makes sense. Like that totally makes sense to me. Okay. Safety issue. Carbon monoxide smoke detectors, locks, and this one, exterior doorway. Okay. And then state and heat utility requirements. Boy, it's super specific. You can tell that the housing in the United States started on the East Coast because of stuff like this. It's pretty incredible. The history is pretty there. And there's lots and lots, like the State Board of Public Utilities is mentioned in here, rent receivership, multifamily housing preservation receivership. Okay, then it talks about the lead-based paint disclosures, post-water test results, for both public systems and private systems. You got to do both. And then remedies if a landlord fails to maintain the property in habitable condition, which is repair and deduct, move out. Like there's a bunch of different ones you could do. They call this constructive eviction, where basically a landlord is letting the place fall apart, and so they want the person to leave. And so constructive eviction occurs when a tenant breaks a lease without penalties because the landlord is guilty of neglect or default, which makes the unit basically uninhabitable. Yeah. Okay, floodplain notification, crime insurance information. Yeah, okay. I forgot we're talking about New Jersey. A little bit of crime there. Okay, I think what I'm going to do, self-help evictions occur when a landlord or someone acting on the landlord's behalf enters into a dwelling unit without the permission of the tenant, without the judgment from the courts, and forces a tenant to move. A lockout occurs. Yeah, you're not allowed to do that. You're not allowed to cut off their utilities. Okay, causes for eviction. So failure to pay rent is the big one, and then mischief, disorderly conduct is what New Jersey calls it. So if a tenant fails to pay rent, landlord may immediately take legal action to have the tenant evicted. If the landlord is not required to give the tenant notice before filing an eviction suit, except if the tenant resides in a federal subsidized housing, and 14-day notice for federally subsidized housing. And let's see, health and safety violation removal. The tenant fails to pay rent or habitually fails to pay rent. If a tenant continuously fails to pay rent or habitually pays late after a written notice to cease, the landlord may file for a suit of eviction. A notice to quit must be served on the tenant at least 1 month before filing the suit for eviction. And the courts have ruled that a habitual late payment means more than one payment following a notice to cease. Basically, you've been warned, and there was leading up to being warned. Yeah. Conviction of a drug offense committed on the property. Oh boy. New Jersey is a little bit of a rough town. Conviction for human trafficking. Wow. Hmm. Okay. I'm going to scoot down a little bit more on this. It talks about foreclosures. It's going to get to the end. Senior citizen and disabled. Now, so this is at the very end of this first resource is a ton of resources, including New Jersey Judiciary Ombudsman offices, and there is just a flood of telephone numbers that you can call. Anti-discrimination offices, there's a bunch, there's websites, legal service programs all over New Jersey, all over, multiple pages on that. And then there is New Jersey Tenants Organization. New Jersey Apartment Association. This is always a good thing. Like, go where the other landlords are, right? And so if you're a landlord in New Jersey and you want to learn more, go there. Property Owners Association, Housing Association, and then there's just a ton more. There's lots and lots and lots. Okay, let's go to the next one. So this one was the first one, the Truth in Renting. This one is New Jersey courts. So this is njcourts.gov, and this is a bunch of self-help items, forms and process. And so I'm just going to scroll down because there's a bunch of these. So it can get very technical, like request for residential warrant of removal. Like, what does that even mean? Right? Certification of lease and registration statement. Let me just open that one so you can see. But this one is lease is attached in full. Yeah. So this is where you've already registered and you're going to file. And so you're submitting this to the courts. You've got the lease and you've got your registration that you have registered your units. So it talks about how you can file. You file in court and all of these things, how to file in landlord tenant court. And you go through the entire thing. I'm not going to go through all of it because it is super detailed, but make sure that you are well versed in this, or even better, pay a property manager who's well versed in this. They are very likely worth the money. Tenant response. Mm-mm-mm. New Jersey State Bar Association maintains lawyer referral services that I've got in this as well. This is all going all the way down to trial, but remember that the whole process of rentals start with screening. Make sure you've got a unit to market, and then you screen, but you got to screen properly. And then you go into your lease, you go into signing your lease application, lease addendum, and then your move-in inspections. Like, there is a bit of a flow to this, and make sure that, like, we're to the very end and things have just absolutely gone sideways, right? So, judgment of possession, laws and legal research, key facts. Yeah, so here's an unregistered rental property. Let's read this. So the property might not be registered as a rental property. If the landlord lives on the property and there are 3 units or fewer, the property must still be registered with the Community Development Authority. And if the landlord does not live on the property, or the property includes more than 3 units, the property must be registered with the Bureau of Housing Inspection. Proof of registration is done through registration statement, which the landlord must file with the complaint. So you have to register it. Yeah. Abatement. Yeah. Security deposits. So it goes on and on with the security deposits on how they work. Very technical. And I haven't seen anything on what to do with like regarding a late payment. Haven't gotten that far yet. And then more housing assistance. There is one, two, three, four, five, about a dozen. And then this is all frequently asked questions. This is still in the same thing. Oh, and this glossary. This glossary is amazing. I'm amazed, actually. Let me put in here glossary. Oh, they didn't put distraint in the glossary. That's so good. Okay. All right, we'll go to the next one. So this one is the official site of the state of New Jersey Department of Community Affairs. So this is nj.gov /DCA/home landlord tenant. Yeah. So this is landlord tenant information, and it's got landlords, tenants, legislative office resources. So let's go to landlords. Truth in Renting Act. And if we open that up, I suspect it's going to open up. So the act, this is actually the act, but it's only three pages. So I don't think that this is actually, it just talks about what it is, not the actual. So Truth in Renting Guide. I suspect that is the one that I've already looked up. Yeah, that's the one we were already just gone through. That's right. Okay. Truth in Renting Notice. Let's look at that one. What's that one? Truth in Renting Notice is no longer available for sale. Okay, thank you for letting us know. Okay, rent control survey. I opened this up and it was super confusing. I'm not even really sure what that is. but municipalities with rent control, it was like a gigantic spreadsheet, and I think you were supposed to find different things. Like I don't understand what it is. So if you are a New Jersey landlord, you need to contact me, please, and I will have you on the show. Let's just dissect everything in New Jersey because this is super, super, super technical. Like, wow. Okay. Law rules, related forms and publications. Let's just go to that one. Oh, wow. Okay. Entry, right of entry bulletin, eviction law, grounds for eviction bulletin. So these bulletins are like fact sheets, right? Foreclosure bulletin, habitability, landlord registration, landlord identity registration form. Landlord identity, that sounds so official, doesn't it? Like I identify as a landlord. Yep. Legal age requirement law, plain language review act. We've mentioned this already. Cable television. And this looks like exactly what we've done already, just in a different form. But that's okay. Distraint law. I like that new word, distraint. That's pretty cool. Okay. Hold over double uh, rent. Sorry, hold over tenant double rent law. That's amazing. Income limits, newly constructed multiple dwelling, rent increase bulletin, rent control survey, senior citizens 5-day grace law. And I still have not seen anything about late fee amounts. So let's go in here. So this is the next one. So this is called Tenants' Right New Jersey, and it was written by Legal Services of New Jersey. It's 151 pages, and I think we've hit most of this already. But honestly, I want to go to late fees. That's one of the things that we have not gotten to yet is a actual late fee. Um, we talked about security deposits, annual notice, late charges. There it is. Okay. Late charges. The many leases require a late charge if the rent is not paid by a certain date of the month, usually the first. This charge is supposed to cover the money lost by the landlord as a result of the late payment. Courts will enforce late charges if they are reasonable and spelled out in writing in the lease. The landlord cannot evict based on non-payment of the late charges unless there is an agreement stating that the late charges are considered to be part of the rent. Wow. Further, there's a bunch more to this. The law states the landlord must allow a tenant a period of 5 business grace days, 5 business days to pay the rent. If the tenant pays the rent within the 5-day period, the landlord may not charge a late fee. In counting the 5 business days, do not include Saturday, Sunday, or a national or state holiday. Okay, well, there's the answer. Reasonable. What did they say? It's supposed to be reasonable and spelled out in writing. Okay. Okay, I'm going to go back up to the table of contents because that is where this is going to help. So let's see if they talk any more about pets. Eviction hearing, abandoned tenant property statute, recovering the property, sample letters. Let's go to the sample letters. Yeah, I love it when they have sample letters. Do the work for you, which is great. Here's a sample letter. Please be informed that I moved out of the above referenced apartment on excuse me. I was not able to remove all my belongings. Basically, they have to let them. Cool. Special programs for tenants. Okay. I love when either they make pre-made forms or they do sample wording or templates or something because it takes the guesswork out. When they don't help with like a warning letter, this is why everybody jumps onto social media. It's a little bit tough. Just reading down, there are lots of different provisions for different things in different places in this handbook. Housing discrimination. No, that's no good. Don't do that. Okay, I'm going to go to the next one. This one is an article that I found, Whelan and Whelan, attorneys at law. So I don't normally do this, but I found this about abandoned property statute. And I thought this was pretty good. So I threw it in here, not an endorsement of this firm itself, but the fact that they had this article was a little bit helpful. So, yeah, abandoned tenant property statute requires landlords to give written notice. And this talks about about marking the envelope, please forward. If the tenant wants their property back, they should immediately respond. Yeah, I think we've been through some of this already, so that might be a little bit of overlap. I went back to newjersey.gov, basic needs. If there's help, there's all kinds of services on helping with, this is for tenant rights and protections, but if you're a landlord and you need help, you can at least start here. And I've got some other ones, legal services in New Jersey. Yeah, and they've got all these different help services, which is good. And then the last one is the statewide legal assistant hotline for New Jersey, Legal Services of New Jersey, and they're located in Edison. But give them a call, but they have a bunch of information on these like evictions. Let's go to evictions. And it talks about defenses and what do I have? This is definitely tenant perspective, which is fine. But let's go back because it's not just evictions. No, it is. Let's go back to rent increases. So your rights around rent increases, community resources, housing resources. Now yeah, interesting. Your rights around rent increases. Let's see what it says. Correct way to increase the rent, notice terminating lease, notice of rent increase. Mm. Increases under rent control. Yeah. Rent increases are limited in the amounts allowed under rent control, local rent control ordinance if the community has adopted rent control and the rental unit is covered by rent control. Moreover, more than 100 cities and townships in New Jersey have passed rent control ordinances. This is exactly why I am not going to talk about rent control stuff in this episode. Okay, so, and this talks about retaliations, right? Yeah. So the law does not allow your landlord to increase your rent in order to quote unquote get even with you because you're using your legal rights as a tenant or because you've reported housing and health code violations to official inspectors or because you belong to a tenant's organization. Yep, that's classic landlord retaliation. Can't do it. Okay, so let me just run through my bingo card here. And there's a lot of things on here that are either covered or they're covered, but I'm not going to go through them because like the rent increases are just so geographic specific. So tenant application fee, we did not see anything about tenant application fees, but I think there was stuff about actual costs. But I know also that there is criminal and actually, let's go back into that. Let me go back into that. Let's go right back in. There it is. Because they do have a spot in the first resource, which is Truth in Renting, about um, fair credit and background checks. Here it is. Background checks, page number 18. Okay, let's go to 18, see what it says. Because my bingo card thing is about the tenant application fee. So let's see what it says. Credit checks and background checks. Landlords may access credit reports for prospective tenants from credit bureaus or tenant screening agencies. The landlord may use the information provided in deciding whether to approve or deny an applicant. If a tenant's application is denied based on their credit report, the landlord must provide the tenant with the name, address, and phone number of the credit reporting or screening agency that supplied the negative report. The landlord is allowed to charge the tenant for the cost of the report. The landlord may also request reasonable rental application fees for or employment verification. So basically, they're paying for it. So they can. The answer is they can charge a tenant application fee. Okay, so grace period for late rent without penalty. For senior citizens, there's a 5 day grace, but it doesn't appear that there's any kind of grace period for anybody else. And the late fee, it just said reasonable, and it has to be in the lease, right? So you have to have that in there already. Security deposit is limited to 1.5 months, 1.5 months, all in, including security deposits for pets, pet damage deposits, if that is what it is. Um, let's see. Yeah, I talked a lot about pets. It didn't actually say pet damage deposits, forgive me. So it said 1.5 months all in. Oh, the security deposit was talking about that if your rent is going up, you can also increase your security deposit annually as the rent goes up. You can also step up the security deposit as well. In other places, you can't do that, but in New Jersey, you can. That's cool. Lease wording and details. It does talk about specific items that are in the leases. Yes. Is an emergency contact required in the event of tenant abandonment, incapacitation, death, or imprisonment? The answer is no, but it is very good practice to have this. That's really good practice to have it. Pets and animals, we did talk about pets a bit, but we also talked about service animals. So you've got to be really clear on that. Is the delivery of a signed lease required? I didn't see it, but that doesn't mean it's not there. And you may have to document that if you sign the lease. I always return it to everybody that signed the lease. That's just sort of standard practice for me. Condition inspection at move-in. Um, yeah, you've got to do that, but I don't remember it saying condition inspection at move-in together. Standard warning letters or wording. There are quite a bit of standard warning letters, template letters, yes, but they're not all there. And there are some standard forms, but not everything, right? And it's quite technical. So if you're just getting started here, it might be a really good idea to get yourself an attorney to help you through this because this is really, really thick. How often can rent be increased? Depends on your area. Rent increase, how much, how proper notice, that is all dependent on where you are and where your rental is. Is renter's insurance required in the state of New Jersey? Yes, it is, which is amazing. I've not seen that anyone else. Is abusive access defined? Yes. Is landlord retaliation defined? Yes. Is the end of a fixed lease abrupt? Yes. In fact, the holdover situation requires the tenant who is still there to pay double rent. Ouch. So no, it does not automatically convert to periodic. Condition inspection at move out. Yes, you need to have one, especially if you're going to deduct anything at move out. Return of deposit or bond. So return of deposit. I don't remember what they said. Return of deposit. Hang on a second. Let me just take a quick look because I know we talked about it. Security deposits and returning the deposit. That would be on page 12. Let's see what we got here. 10, 11, 12. Okay, security deposits. Yeah, 1.5 times rent, but when returning, it talks a lot about, for the security deposit, it talks a lot about interest bearing. So when you're returning, when we get to that part, you absolutely want to make sure that you have you have a statement of all the interest that's been bared from that security deposit. And it can't be very much. I mean, we're not talking big amounts here. We're not talking tens of thousands of dollars for a security deposit, typically. So it can't be too much, but you do want to have it. And then 30, here we go. Within 30 now, that's still the interest rate. Uh, okay, so you got to return the security deposit within 30 days or a dispute will be filed. Yeah. And then unless there's a problem with the unit, that's right. So if it was like fire flood issues that they can't even live there anymore, that's part of it. Okay. Can you use the deposits as last month's rent? I didn't see that. Mm, how long until you can give notice of eviction due to non-payment of rent? Few days. I don't know. I'm getting tired. I'm sorry. I know we went through it. It's in there. Abandoned items. We talked about abandoned items as well. So I'm going to wrap it up here. It's been a long night, and New Jersey is quite overwhelming. I'm actually really impressed, but I'm also exhausted. So when we wrap this up, just knowing that each of my location-specific episodes answer the same four questions. What are the basics of that location? What are some of the nuances? What's some guidance about the abandoned items and where to get help? Now, one more reminder that especially in New Jersey, because this is so freaking technical, I can't believe it. You need to do your own homework. This is absolutely not, there's no way it's all inclusive. Like there's no way. There's just too much. So make sure that you are doing your own homework and for sure, get in the conversation with other New Jersey landlords, especially some of the OGs who have learned lessons and they can tell you the ins and the outs and who to use as an attorney, for example. Make sure that you are being smart about that kind of stuff. So make sure you're familiar with your resources, you're talking to your local folks, that all your units are registered where they're supposed to be, and that you are having conversations either in person with other landlords or on social media. You can go to landlord Facebook groups, New Jersey. You can, jump in some of the larger forums and say, hey, I'm a landlord from New Jersey. I'm just getting started. And then all the New Jersey landlords will pop out, and there may even be dedicated Facebook groups just for New Jersey. So take a look. But I hope you enjoyed today's show. Wow, I am just floored. I'm super exhausted. I cannot believe how technical this is. It's a good thing, but it's super, super ensnared, right? Like super technical. Okay, back to the show. Don't forget to like and subscribe for My Life as a Landlord so you get more expert advice and real stories from around the globe. I'm recording this from Maui, Hawaii, and I always say the location. Why? Because real estate takes you places. Where do you want real estate to take you? Join me in the next episode live right now in the library, episode 200, 200, about my first state in Australia, Queensland. I'll see you there.